Hi everyone, welcome to Jawaras. Let's continue building the authorization server. In the previous video, we generated authorization code whenever the user allows the auth request. In the authorization interface, where the user can deny or allow the request, we are displaying a hard-coded list of accesses the client application is requesting for. But we need to populate the list dynamically, and that is done using scopes. In this video, we will understand what scope is, what is the use of scope, and how it is used. So let's dive in. First of all, we will try to understand what is a scope. A scope is a way to control the application's access to a user's resources or actions. Scope is just a string which may have some description. For example, contact.read is a scope which may be used to read the authenticated user's contact, and it should have a valid description like application can read your contacts. Now let's see what the use of scope is. Using scope, we can provide the application with fine-grained access to the user's resources. Instead of giving the application either all access or no access at all, we can give the access what the application needs or what the user allows. So the application will not be able to access the resource for which it is not authorized. Now let's see how it is used. Let's say you have an authorization server which allows two scopes to be defined by the client application. The first is contact.read and the second is contact.write. You also have a resource server here and it has two endpoints. First endpoint is, suppose let's say, contact and read, and the second endpoint is contact and write. The first endpoint is to read the user's contacts and another is to edit the user's contacts. For the first endpoint, that means reading contact endpoint, you have configured that the access token must have contact.read scope. So whenever someone tries to invoke this endpoint using access token, the access token should have contact.read scope. And similarly, the access token used to call this endpoint should have contact.write scope in it. Now let's say the first application, client 1, creates an auth request and specifies scope equal to contact.read. So in the auth request, the scope will be contact.read. And user allows the request after exchanging the authorization code for access token from authorization server. The application will have an access token for the user with contact.read permission. So the access token which we will get back here, so I will just 80 for access token. Now this token will have contact.read scope defined in it. Now if the application tries to read the user's contacts from the resource server using the access token, so this client application will send this access token to the resource server in order to read the contact. So that means we are calling this first endpoint. Now it will check whether the access token has the contact dot read scope or not. And since this access token has this scope, so this resource server will allow this client to send request at this endpoint. Similarly, if the second client, suppose the second client creates a auth request with scope query parameter equal to contact dot read plus contact dot write. Now, okay, first see here, if client 1 tries to send another request uh, to this endpoint to read the contact, sorry, to write the contact, and it sends this access token. Now this access token does not have this contact dot write scope, so this request will fail and we will get 403 access denied exception. And let's say this is second client. So second client has sends auth request with this scope equal to contact.read and contact.write, and users allows the request, and when the client will get the access token, that access token will have both of these scopes. So now this second client can access both of these endpoints without any issue. So this is how scopes work. Now the scopes are related to the realms. That means different realms will have different sets of scopes. So whenever an application requests for a scope, the scope should have been defined to the realm for which the application belongs. In the above example, the application cannot create an auth request for scope equal to post.read since post.read scope is not defined in the realm. Another thing, most of the time the authorization server marks some of the scopes as mandatory. So there can be some mandatory scopes like email, profile, and let's say OpenID. These three scopes are related to OpenID protocol, which we will study in the later videos. For now, just know that these scopes are required to get basic details about the user, like email, name, profile picture, gender, etc. And the realms cannot define these scopes individually. These are related to the authorization server. But all other scopes are related to the realms. So let's say realm has two scopes, contact.read and contact.write. And so these scopes are defined in the realm. Now let's say there is one application for this realm. So I will call it app1. So this is related to this realm. So while creating auth request, this app can specify scope equal to. So they now this um, application must specify these scopes email plus profile plus OpenID because these are uh, required or mandatory scopes. Additionally, it may specify any one of these scopes. So let's say contact.read. But for example, if the application tries to specify another scope, let's say post.write. Now this scope is not defined for this realm. So this will not work. So we will get some error like invalid scope. So the first of all, the author validates whether all the required scopes should be present in the scope parameter. And then another one is whatever request we send apart from the required scopes should be present in that realm. So in this application, the only scopes apart from the required scopes should be present are contact.read or contact.write. Once the auth request is validated, the user sees the login page. After logging in, the authorization interface is presented to the user. In the interface, the user can see the realm, logged in username, application name, and description, and the scopes the application is requesting for. So I will create that is authorization interface here. So let's say this is a browser. So we will see one let's say one page here. So this is authorization interface. We have already seen that. So this can be let's say realm name, and then here we can say logged in as, and then this can be username. Now after it, we need to display the application or the client application. So the application name. So we try to display all the information possible for this application. So for example, application name, the description, the home page URL, and like let's say terms and services or privacy policy URL or whatever we want, we can present that here. And after this, we need to present what are the scopes the application is requesting for. Now there are two ways we can go ahead with this. First is just show the description of all the scopes the client is asking for. So for example, the client is asking for some scopes. So what I will do is I will display list. The first I will display like if the scope is email, so we can display the application is trying to read your email, and so these are required scopes, and after that we will have some optional scopes. So let's say read your contacts. So read your contacts, then edit your contacts, edit your contacts. So we can display this list to the user, and after that we can provide it two buttons to the user. The first button will be, let's say, deny button. So whenever user clicks on this button, the application is denied, or another button will be allow button. So whenever user clicks on allow button, the application is authorized with all these scopes. Now here the user does not have flexibility to choose which scopes he wants to allow the application. So that is the second approach which we can take. Instead of displaying the list of user which user cannot modify, and display all the scopes as a list of checkboxes. So for example, this will be the first checkbox, and here we can say read your email, and then this is another checkbox. So this is another scope, this is another scope. So let's say these three are our required scope, and then we can have some optional scopes here. So this is checkbox, and let's say read your contacts, and then another checkbox, and which will be read or sorry, edit your contacts. So we can display this interface to the user. Now since these are required scopes, so they will be checked, but these will be disabled, so that user cannot modify the value of the checkboxes. So user cannot untick these checkboxes, but these checkboxes will also be ticked. But here now the user can untick the checkbox which he want. So for example, the user does not want the application to edit his contacts, so he can uncheck this. Now the application will have only this contact dot read scope. So here, but let's say the application is not asking for reading the sorry, editing the context, so we should not display this. So that means we will display the list of all these scopes which the application is requesting for. We will use the second approach in this video. So I already written the code required to facilitate the scopes. I will go through it here. You can find the code in the GitHub repository linked in the description. So in order to store the scopes, since we are using MySQL database and one realm can have multiple scopes, so what we are going to do is we are going to create a new table. So I have created a new table here. The name of the table is realm scopes. It has realm ID and then the scope's name and the description of the scope. So we need these three things here. And the realm ID should be and the realm ID should be foreign key to the realms table. So that being said, what I am doing is since I already have two realms available in the database, Java and Rust. So while starting the application, I am creating these scopes. So as you can see, for the Java realm, we have email.read, email.write, contact.read, and contact.write scopes. While for Rust realm, we have post.read and post.write scopes. So that was about the changes in database schema. Now we need to create a scope record as well. So this is the scope. It has realm ID, name, description, and then it has a boolean flag whether it is required or not. Now we have a scope repository. So this scope repository has some method. The first method is to find all by realm ID. So we will provide one realm ID, and it will fetch us all the scopes in this realm, and all the scopes will be required equal to false. So I'm using JDBC client here in order to fetch all the scopes. Then we have count by realm ID and name. So this will count all the scopes which are present for in this realm with the given name. So this is used so that we don't enter duplicate scopes in the same realm. Then in order to insert a scope, we have another method here. So that is scope repository. Let's go to scope service here. So now in the scope service we have some reserved scopes. So and it is a set of email profile and open ID. So Realm cannot have these scopes. These should be defined at the authorization server level. And these are the permitted characters inside any scope's name. And we have a dependency on scope repository, and we are injecting it using constructor injection. Now let's say we want to get all the scopes given realm ID. So we are calling this find all by realm ID method of the scope repository. Now let's say we want to create a new scope. So first of all, what we are checking is, so we have two things here, realm ID and scope. So first of all, the realm ID should be equal to the realm ID of the scope. If it is not, then we are throwing this invalid scope exception. Then we are validating the scope. So uh, yeah, let's see how we are validating the scope. So first of all, I'm checking the scope's length should not be less than 4. It should be at least 4 characters. And all the characters inside scope's name should be from permitted characters. So in the permitted characters, I have a small alphabet and then this dot. So these are the permitted characters. After that, the scope should not be in reserved scopes. So this should not be in reserved scopes. Then I am checking whether we already have this scope for this realm. So we are counting how many scopes are there. Well, realm ID is equal to scopes realm ID, and the uh, name is equal to this scope's name. So if there are more than 0, then we are throwing this error invalid scope exception, that scope already exists. Now we have validated the scopes. Now what we are trying to do is we are trying to insert this into the repository, and if number of rows affected is not equal to 1, then we are throwing this error. So we are throwing this runtime exception here, and while validating we are throwing invalid scope exception, and this extends runtime exception, so we don't need to catch it. Okay, so we covered scope service, scope repository. Okay, let's see scope controller as well. So in the scope controller we have only one endpoint. So this is used to add a new scope for a realm. So the path is realms ID, and then it's realm ID and scope, and we are getting scope as request body, and we are doing nothing else than calling create new scope method of scope service. So that's pretty familiar. So we have covered all these. We have covered scope, scope controller, scope repository, scope service. Let's see scope request as well. So here I have one just simple curl command to call that endpoint in order to create new scopes. So we have covered it. We have covered the schema as well. So we don't need to cover these HTTP files. I just moved them from one directory to another directory. So that's why we are getting these changes. So we don't need to look here. This is invalid scope exception, which extends runtime exception. We have clients.http, client secret.http. Okay, we have authorization service test. We have auth.http. Okay, now let's go to authorization controller. Yes, here authorization controller. So here we made some changes in present authorization interface method. What we did is this present authorization interface. First of all, I just reformatted the code. I removed this at the rate path variable annotation because that is not needed here. So first, I am getting the realm because we need to show the information of the realm as well in the authorization interface. Earlier, we were not doing that, but we need to do that. So I am fetching realm as well from the database using realm service. Then we have this client here. Then I am fetching all the scopes for this realm. So I'm calling auth service get all scope methods. So let's go to this method get all scopes. So this will return all the scopes for this realm. So we have get all scopes, and we have this auth request. Then we have requested scopes. So these are the scopes requested in the auth request. So from the auth request, we will split them using space, and we will convert them to the set. And after that, we have these are the scopes which are available in the realm. So for that, we are calling scope service dot get scopes by realm ID method. We are providing the realm ID, and then we will get all the realm. We will get all the scopes which are defined for that realm. And then what we are doing is we are adding all the required scopes as well to the realm scopes. So what we are doing is from the realm scopes, we are filtering all the scopes which are inside requested scopes, and then we are returning them. Then we will add this realm and scopes attribute to the model, and we will write some code in authorization interface to handle that. But we will do that later. Now let me go to authorization service, and here if you recall, we were doing some validation of scopes here. Yeah, I'm creating a set of scopes, so and I'm calling it required scopes. So these are the scopes which are required, and I am marking all of them as required equal to true. And we have three scopes: email, profile, and open ID. And I have some description for them. And for all these scopes, the realm ID is empty because these scopes are not related to any realm. Now after that, I am injecting scope service as well here. Okay, so while verifying auth request, we are validating scope. Okay, so first I am getting a scope array. I am converting this from array to set. Then first I am validating that all required scopes should be present. So I am doing that right here. If all required scopes is not present, then we will throw this invalid auth request exception, and the code will be invalid scope, and the description will be this scope is required but it is not present. After that, we need to validate the optional scopes. So how we are doing is, first of all, we are getting all the scopes available for the given realm. So we are getting all the scopes by realm ID using the auth request.realm ID, and we are converting them to set, and we are only getting their name. So we are getting a scope, and then we are mapping them from the scope to scope's name. Now we will add all the required scopes as well to the available scopes, and for each scope which is in requested scope, that scope should be inside available scopes. Only then the request is valid, otherwise we will say this scope is not a valid scope. So this scope is requested but it is not available and it is not valid. So that's how we are validating the scopes. Now let's look at authorization interface. This is the authorization interface. Now here, if you recall, we are getting few things here. So first of all, we have the realm. So we are displaying the realm's name here. Then signed in as the user's username. After that, we have a form here. Since we need to display some checkboxes, so I created a form here. Now in this form, we are displaying the client's name, client's description, homepage URL, and now we are displaying a list of all the scopes using checkboxes. So for each scope in the scope, so if you recall, the scopes are being passed here as a collection. So we can iterate over them. Now we have an input here. Inputs type is checkbox. The ID is scope.name. Its value is scope.name, and this is the name. So the name I am giving is selected scopes. So all the scopes which are ticked apart from the disabled scope, and they will be sent in the requests body. If any scope is required, I'm marking that as disabled so that user cannot untick that box. And I am displaying the scope's description. Here we have a deny button. So I removed the button and I converted it to a link. And then I have this allow button. So I removed the a tag from this button, since whenever you click on this button, this form will get submitted to this URI, which is allow action URI. Now here what we are doing is So we are getting the logged in user. After that, we are getting the selected scopes, and we are passing the auth request, and we also need to pass the selected scopes. So this is auth request, and from the request, from the HTTP servlet request, we are getting the parameter values, selected scopes. So this is the same as the selected scopes. So we will get all the checkbox which are selected with this name. So if I go to this method, how we are getting the selected scopes. So we are passing auth request and we are passing name of all the selected scopes. So first of all, I am getting the scopes defined in the realm using the scope service, and after that I am converting these realm scopes and required scopes to scopes name, and then I am collecting them and putting them in a set. So now I have a set of all the available scopes, and available scopes contains scopes inside realm and scopes which are required. Now all these selected scopes should be inside available scopes. If not, then I am erasing this exception, invalid auth request exception, with the redirect URI. This is the code invalid scope, and the scope is not a valid scope. This is the description. Now let's say we don't raise any exception. That means all the scopes are valid. Then what we need to do is we need to concat the required scopes and the selected scopes, and collect them in a set and return it. So we are getting the selected scopes here. Now after that, after getting the selected scopes, while creating the authorization code, we need to take the scopes into account as well. So in the authorization service allow request, I am passing the selected scopes as well. So selected scope is a collection of string. Now in the authorization code, I am passing the selected scopes. So we have changed the code of authorization code. So I will go here. So we looked at authorization service, authorization controller, authorization. Now let's look at authorization code. So let's go to authorization code here. Now here you see we have realm ID, client ID, redirect URI, username and scopes. And we are getting the scopes here. So how are we storing these scopes? We are storing them as space separated. So whenever we need to convert it to string, then we are doing string dot join space and then scopes. So all scopes will be joined by spaces in between, and we have collect and whenever we need to convert string to authorization code, we are taking the fifth parameter of the uh, splitted array, and then we are splitting that using space again. So now we have all the scopes. So that being said, we don't need any more code changes. So this is done, this is done. Now let's start the application. So let's say we want to create some scope. And if you remember in the schema.sql, we delete all the scopes and we inserted these scopes. So we should not be able to create these scopes again. So what I will do is I will paste it here. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to create a scope for realm rush. The name is post.delete. Description is delete your posts. So I will do that, and we are not getting an error. And this is the database. So if I say show tables, we have these tables realm scopes. So let's see what is inside realm scope. Select to start from realm scopes. So this is the new uh, scope we just created. Now let's try to create another scope. So Russ, I will try to create any scope with name email. Now since email is required scope, so we should not be able to do that. And we paste here. Now we can see invalid scope email. And if I run this, we still have 7 rows in the table. Now let's try to run this command again. Let's say Java, and the name of the scope will be let's just say contact.read. So I will just say contact.read. I'll copy it and I will paste it here. So realm ID does not match. Okay, because this should be Java as well. Now let's copy it, paste it here. Scope contact.read already exists, so we cannot create this scope. So now you know that this endpoint is working. Now since the application is running, I will try to create a new auth request. So in the request auth.http, I will just soft wrap it so it can be viewed easily. So I will soft wrap it. So this is the auth URL. I will remove it. So here you can see we are passing a scope email. So we can use this page as well here. So we have email, profile, open ID, email.read, contact.write and so on. But for now, let's just do this. Let's not pass any scope. So I will copy it and I will paste it here. And we are getting this error code invalid scope. Error description is scope not present. So now let's give some scope. Scope equal to email. Again, I will copy it and I will paste it here. You can say open ID is required. So let's put open ID and copy it and again paste it here. Profile is required. So we have email, open ID, profile. Okay, let's just give it these. Copy it and I will paste it here. Now the username is, let's say user one, password is pass1. Now you can see we are displaying the real name here, signed in as user one. This is the client application's name, the client application's description, and these are the description of the required scopes. Now either we can deny or we can allow. Let's deny it. So VC access denied. Now let's provide another. So I will say post dot read and I will copy it. I will paste it here. Now we can see post dot read is not a valid scope. Okay. So since this is not a valid scope, let's just say we just want to read the contact. So contact dot read and I will copy it. I will paste it here. Now we can see we can check or uncheck it. Let's say we want the contact right as well. Contact right. So I will copy it. I will paste it here. Now we need to log in again because I guess this session is expired. Now it says this app wants to read your contacts, edit your contact. Let's say I don't want it to edit my contact and I will click on allow. So now we are redirected back here. I will copy it and I will paste it here. So we have this code and we don't have any state I guess because we are not sending any state in the request. But if we have sent it, we would have get it. So this authorization code contains all the scopes which the user has allowed. Now whenever client application tries to exchange this authorization code with access token, then the authorization server will read the scopes present in the authorization code and it will generate access token which contains the same set of scopes, and then it will send the access token to the client application. Now the client application can send the access token to the resource server, and the resource server will know that what all scopes are present in the access token, and based on that it can either allow the request or it can throw access denied exception. So that's all for this video. I will meet you in the next one. Thank you for watching it. Bye.